So good evening and welcome to Cerulean Arts Gallery for our virtual tour and talk for the current collective exhibition, which features the work of Cathleen Cohen, Pia De Girolamo, Fran Lightman Gibson, Denise Cedar, and Carol Taylor-Kearney. So the exhibition is on view through May the 1st, so you're welcome to come and see it in person. If you can, we're open Wednesday to Friday, 10 to 6, Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 6. But you can also check it out on the website. So as we go, I'll put links to the artists in the chat for you. You can see everything there, which is convenient. So what we'll do is walk through the gallery, through each exhibition, and the artists will speak a little bit about themselves, their background, and their work. So we will get started. Let me spotlight Tina's video for you. And the first gallery we're going to visit is Kathy Cohen. Hello, Kathy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
So Kathy, would you like to speak a little bit about yourself and your background and about your work?
Oh, surely. Thank you. Well, I did go to the academy in the 80s and I got my certificate there. I was a mother of 3 during that time and had a career as a special education teacher. But I had always written poetry, and my work, the job I've been doing for the last 20 some odd years has been to work with an organization called Artwell, where we teach poetry and art to underserved kids in the Philadelphia area and abroad. So I do write poetry all the time, and I teach poetry as well. And so I think that my work, hopefully, is lyrical and relates to the spoken word. I don't usually paint with ekphrasis. I don't usually write poems about paintings I've done. More so, the work informs each other. So I might be painting one day and then go write a poem that seems a little unrelated. Although I have done some ekphrastic poems recently, and some are in the show actually. And
so what exactly does the term mean, Kathy?
It's from Greek, and it's where you are really responding and describing. It's about description. So it might be a piece of writing that is just hoping to describe a work of art, but it does more than just describe. So it can be a jumping off point for making your own meaning, for having conversations with that art piece, or questioning it, or highlighting elements of the piece, or speaking from the point of view of something, an object in the painting. So it's a way to really interact with that piece, and hopefully give more meaning and create more conversation and meaning. So, so I hadn't been painting that way, but this year I actually tried that out a bit more. So, and in fact, we're having a workshop this Saturday. I'll put in a plug.
Yes.
Yeah. For any artists who are interested in seeing what kind of language and text might evolve or be created while you play with painting. So I just find it to be really an interesting process that both can happen, and there are different processes when you write language, but I think it's fascinating, and it's been an exercise I've been doing for many years. So, and with some success, I will say, in that I was lucky. We were talking about the COVID and what all the artists were doing. Well, I started to write poetry quite a bit, and and I've been happy with the results and published a couple of books this year, last year, which was shocking. Yeah, but anyway, we're going to have a workshop this Saturday. Well, any artists are welcome to join, and you'll be working with your own work as well as responding to other people's artwork, and just see what can come out of it.
Yes, we still have some space, and I put a link in the chat if you want to sign up. So, so Kathy, these are all watercolors, yes?
Yes. So that is my preferred medium. I love the way art watercolors flow. So I did go to the academy, so I learned how to paint realistically. And this is about as realistic as I get right here. But I also love abstraction. So I like to dabble in all of it. Not dabble, but to work in those ways.
So do you go back and forth? Do you go back and forth
yes.
between realism and abstraction? How does it?
Yeah, I do. It's almost like playing scales when you do realism for me. So I'm working on issues of space and kind of colors, what's adjacent, how to move the eye through the piece of work. And then when I've painted something realistically, then I have to let it go and just go paint abstractly. And that for me is more emotional. And there's some interesting interior narrative that might not be obvious to someone looking. And that doesn't matter if you bring your own meaning to whatever piece of art you see. So, you know, both carry a lot of power for me to work in both ways. And then an added piece is then to write poetry. Mike, do I have time to read one quick poem about painting?
Of course.
Okay. So this is from a book called Etching the Ghost. And the first poem, it's called Some Tide. Skimming air, each stroke a note, carried, counted, and lit. I need most what I can't control. Each stroke with a squirrel tail brush, dipped in watercolor, each hand jitter, each twitch, jagged petals, more thorn than rose. There's no covering up, no layers of thick embodied oil paint to dissemble. This flower looks carved in quartz, says my son, frowning, tilting it up to light. Where's this from? A garden I can't name, but my hand meant it. The brush, vibrations, some tide flung out in the wind. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
So Kathy, when you work representationally, are you working from the subject, or is it like from reference material?
Yes, usually from reference material, and preferred is plein air painting, especially if I'm doing landscape. I do lots of portrait work also, and that's from reference material. In the old days, it was from my children when they would sit down to do homework or watch TV, but now I have fast-moving grandchildren, and so, reference material. Yeah.
I forgot to mention, if anybody has questions, you can put them in the chat and I can relay them for you. So Kathy, are your titles like important to you as a poet, like in terms of pinning down the meaning of the piece, or?
Yes, increasingly so, Mike. And in fact, some from the more recent book. And so some were painted where sometimes I would take a line from a poem and think about it and then just go paint. So that yes, and in many cases. So I think it's called Disperses too. Maybe my newest book is called Sparks and Disperses. So yeah, definitely. And certain themes, of course, appear and reappear. You know, you kind of create your own vocabulary of mark making and how marks relate to each other. And so that's true of poetry too. So for me, and so certain phrases and ideas might repeat throughout poems over years, even, you know, some of the themes I'm taking up. This one's called Soul. And it's actually my friend Jeff Thompson, another Cerulean Arts cooperative member, painted a beautiful oil painting with a gate opening onto what looked like an endless field. And so that idea of a gate made its way into this picture. And so there's certain things, certain symbols that seem to be repeating for me. I did a lot of paintings with ladders this year, doing a lot of reading of Old Testament, and really interested in certain myths there, and you know, the idea of Jacob's ladder. Also, this idea of a cyanometer. I don't know if there are any. The next painting has that idea, and it's the next two. So the cyanometer was invented by a Swiss explorer, Frederick de Saussure, and he actually painted with cyan color. It looked like a color wheel of white to very, very dark cyan blue. And he would hold these up and look at the sky and see if he could predict temperature as he was climbing mountains and exploring. And at the time, it was something that was used by others. So a friend asked me to do a cover for her book of poetry. Faith Paulson is the poet, and the book is called Cyanometer. So I did that for her, and then started to, cyanometers, these started to emerge in several paintings that I was doing. And I was really grateful to her. So.
It's great. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
So like Kathy said, she's doing a workshop on Saturday, 10 to 3. You can still sign up. Kathy, do people have to have poetry experience to do such a thing?
No poetry experience necessary. Not at all.
Let's take one last look at Kathy's show. It's a beautiful exhibition. Thanks so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
And now we're going to visit with Carol Taylor-Kearney. Hello, Carol.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
Fine.
Thank you for doing such a wonderful job with this. And thank you, Kathy, for such a nice presentation of everything. It really let me come in and understand your work, which I really enjoyed. What you're looking at now are two pieces. One is Oil on Board, and I call it Conjure. And the second one is Oil on Window, and that's Ophelia. And the way that it works is I had collected a bunch of black and white photographs. And from the black and white photographs, I would do a quick oil sketch on wallboard. I had wallboard left over for whatever reason. I just collect stuff. Anyway, while I painted this, I thought about it and imagined other things. So initially this was a girl standing with this very self-possessed pose in a graduation gown and cap and somewhat old-fashioned dress and big clunky shoes. So I don't know why, but I turned her feet into bare feet and some marks and gave her a crown. And when I did that, she suddenly became noble. And I thought, I must be reading too much Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and
Feeling good about sharing.
What's that?
It's, yeah, some background noise here.
Okay. Anyway, I was thinking about too many of these readings that I was doing, including the play Hamlet, which is one of my favorites. And so she became Ophelia. In between, there is a large oil or large charcoal drawing of her as well. But these are on window, and they're done in something called reverse painting on glass. As I do this, I think of ideas and just write the ideas down on Post-it notes that I keep. And that becomes what ends up on the window. So on the back of the window is the figure and most of the landscape, Ophelia drowned. And this is Ophelia drowning, similar to the Malaise painting or the MacDonald painting, which both show Ophelia at that state. And that reminded me, for some reason, of Sean Scully. Sean Scully does geometric paintings that I have found are supposed to be about the landscape, but actually, I always thought of them as heraldry. They reminded me of flags. And because she's a noble woman, she got Sean Scully's flags painted on her and throughout the painting. So that's what I'm doing for much of the work here. I'm doing something on the back and juxtaposing something else on the front.
So Carol, a lot of your imagery is very family oriented.
Yes.
Is it your family, or where do you get it from?
Okay, these are from black and white photos that I found while I was delivering newspapers and with my husband. If you take walks around neighborhoods, people are always getting rid of things or emptying houses. And I would just find these abandoned photographs. So I don't know who these people are. Initially in this photograph, this was taken from a newspaper clipping, and the girls were touching a fence. And I take it that they were walking to school. And I just painted them separately and then just let each of the ideas come as I painted them. And from this, I started thinking of going and coming. And so that one was called Reach. This one is called Home. And while I painted it, I thought of the artist Jennifer Bartlett, who had done a whole series of tiles with these little red houses painted on it. I tie a lot of the things that I do to art history. So the figures had to be someplace, so I put them on a road. And then the landscape is, the larger house is from Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. And the small house in the back, I got from a photograph of the House for American Gothic by Grant Wood. And that's how it came together to become this place.
Carol, what does a window as a vehicle mean for you?
Well, I got started on windows when I was teaching, and I was using them as a palette. And every time I'd have to clean the palette, I thought that the stuff I was looking through looked far more interesting than many of the paintings that came out of the palette. So once I did that, I thought, you know, you can do this. You could do an image on both sides and they can relate and not relate. And I find that very interesting. So you have the whole idea of the Renaissance window view into a world, which is represented by a window. Then you have the stuff that you can paint on the back that moves past the picture plane. Then you have the stuff that you can paint on the front, which moves forward from the picture plane. So basically, I got the idea because I love to play with the picture plane. You can carve into it, you can go in back of it, you can go in front of it, and you can still put some kind of narrative on it. I like narrative because I find that the easiest way of automatically communicating to other people. People recognize narrative modes, and then I can start to add other things. That last painting was called Apron Strings, and it's based on, I was thinking of Gorky while I was painting the mother and her sons, which is the name of this piece, which came from a black and white photo. So we go black and white photo, painting, window painting.
Are you still finding black and white photos?
Oh yeah, all the time. People just get rid of things, and if you're in a flea market or just walking around, people get rid, you just find them. Now this is from a picture of my 3 daughters at a day at a museum, and then we went outside the museum and climbed around. And for this piece, I was thinking about Bridgette, now I can't think of her name, but I was Bridgette Riley, and because she does geometrics in the bridge, which is the part on the right-hand side, just reminded me of a bunch of geometrics. And then it was a cloudy day and we would get sun and no sun. So I thought about what happens with clouds. This is called illusion of a cloud illusion. So out of screening, which goes with windows, I made an illusion of clouds. And then from clouds, you get rain, you get snow, you get wind, you get air, blows leaves around. So I tried to mix within all of this the different seasonal things that come and go with clouds, as well as children. Children come and go with clouds. You start off as babies, and before you know it, they've grown into adults, and there you are. They're your friends.
So Carol, you're also using collage elements here, yes?
Yes. Yes, I use a lot of found materials. The windows are all found. On the first one, which is called Course of Liberty, from the painting, I was thinking about Jackson Pollock. And so I've included the drips from Jackson Pollock. When I look at a Jackson Pollock, I always think that there's something going on in it that you just can't see. That there's something moving around in the background, some shadow figure. So I put my own figure back there. And then related to the one with the red houses, I included a red house because we're always on the course of coming to or from home. And aside from that, at the very bottom, you see little screens of lizards. And anyone who knows anything about Jackson Pollock knows he loved lizards and he spent time in Arizona. Lizards were sacred images to him.
So Carol, you attended the Pennsylvania Academy?
Yes, I did, in an MFA program, which is where I got to meet you.
Yes.
And Tina. And this one's called Whisper of Renewal, and it's painted both front and back. The yellow and purple areas are all painted on the front, and the back has the figure and the background. And then on top of that is cut screening. And I cut up pieces of images by Katie Kollwitz. I thought that this figure had a very wistful and somewhat sad look to her, as well as it was a very, to me, this is a very moody piece that represented my feeling at the time. The pattern in her dress is actually a collage that's on back. So I'm playing with both the front and the back of the window as I go through these things. It's called Being Restless. This one is called Shadow Holds Their Breath, and it's from a line from Emily Dickinson, which is actually about the landscape, which I just think it's a beautiful line. And as I was doing this piece, it had a crack in it to begin with, and I was trying to make a crack in it and then talk about the metaphysical world, that there's this world that we're very well aware of, and at the same time, there's a metaphysical world, whether you want to think of it as the interior world of yourself or another space-time continuum that's going on at the same time. And also thinking about Bridgette Riley here, those two are done in conjunction with each other. And I practically destroyed this one in order to have it come out to be what I wanted. This one's a more straightforward narrative. It was based on, I have about 5 different paintings I've done of the same scene. Some are very small. Some of them are as big as, I don't know, 6 feet by 8 feet. And they're in different proportions, but they're all based on a night we spent on the beach with fireworks. And the point of it is how light transfers off figures and bounces off of figures in very different ways. So you have the moonlight, the sparkler light, the flashlight, and of course, the light of the children's faces as they do their separate little things to entertain themselves, and the mom, who is me, behind the camera. Oh, and it's called Fireflies, Shadow Chases. So the piece on the left and the piece on the far right are the two related. The left one came from a black and white photograph. The right one is the window that came from it. It's called Curls. And to me, the whole point of it is that the figure's in a curled state, the hair is in a curled state. She's collecting the curls that are on her head. And looking at it, it reminded me of collecting, and who's the greatest artist who is a collector is Andy Warhol. And so everything that's pictured on here is from actual objects that Andy Warhol collected. So yes, those are his cookie jars that I found in photographs. I do deep dives into people. I'm a stalker.
It's interesting that you graphed like art historical reference onto. Like,
my brain always
found like family photos.
Well, it's like some people take a walk and they see trees in a pretty sky. I take a walk and I see Corot, and then there's Monet, and
I mean, you seem to have a pretty broad swath of art history that you're thinking of.
Well, right now I'm doing deep dives into women artists who are relatively unknown. So I'm working on blankets, but yes, no, I love art history, and
your computer's on 5 art history books right now.
It's true. In order to get it up to where it needs to be, it's like I'm stacked on Jasper Johns, American Impressionism, a tome on Norman Rockwell. So like it can Hockney. Yeah, David Hockney. It can jump all over. This is called I Saw a Bug, and this is about some children that I know, my friends' grandchildren, and a day spent with them in the backyard, and just a love of having collected a bunch of rubber bugs. And everything in it is either handmade bugs or these rubber bugs, or buttons that are bugs. That's a for real hornet's nest that grew on a window at my house. And of course, you have to have the game of cooties if you're dealing with bugs. And that's what we spent the day doing, actually, was just looking at all the bugs we'd find in and around the yard. And we even collected them in little collectors and nets. And there is a for real magnifying glass so that you can look at the slides of bug pieces, little bug parts, legs, abdomens.
So Carol, you went to Academy for MFA, but what did you do before that?
Before that, I got a BA in art education at Rowan University. And because I was married, had children and a mortgage, I had already run a library program and done a few other things. And so at the Academy, I worked a zillion jobs, from the library to coordinate. I helped the coordinator of models and props, and sat through being there in the summer to make sure that the studios ran, and just a bunch of different stuff where I got to know a lot of really great artists who I had lots of questions for, and they showed me a whole lot of great technique. And then it was just like experimentation, and I continue to try to do experimentation. I like the tradition, but I also like to try out something new. And this one is called Haydn Roseline. It's based on a poem by Goethe, and which Haydn Roseline means red rose in a yellow field. And it's the story of a young boy who goes out into a field and sees a flower and says to the flower, "I'm going to pick you." And the flower says back, "If you pick me, I will stick you." And the little boy picks the flower and immediately drops it, and the flower dies. Goethe's a really happy fellow. I thought of it in terms of an altarpiece. So aside from the two big windows I found, I cut out two smaller windows and refitted them with glass. So that's a reverse painting on the back of a piece of glass that's in the back. And you're looking through pattern glass in order to see it. And these are just done in traditional reverse painting on glass. And because I sewed it together to make it an altarpiece, it has little parts and pieces that refer to sewing, because we also sew flowers.
What? Who? You sew flowers for what?
You sew flowers. You spread.
You sow seeds.
You sow seeds to make flowers.
I see.
So I'm playing with words.
Well, it's a wonderful show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
And thank you and Tina both for doing such a lovely job with it.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure. Right, so next we're going to visit Pia De Girolamo. Hello, Pia.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Mike. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, would you like to speak a bit about yourself and your work for us?
Sure. I'm sort of an independent study person in terms of my art education. So I don't have a formal degree, but I have studied with artists ever since childhood. This particular show is a little bit of a departure for me. So in the past, I have been really painting the landscape, partly because we were lucky enough to be able to do a lot of traveling and to very rugged places. And so I would sketch in the field, take a lot of photographs, come back to the studio and rely on memory and not so much on the photographs, but to kind of make a composite of what I was seeing. During the pandemic, that wasn't a possibility. And so that, although I had many photographs, I didn't have maybe the that push to, or that emotion, the high of having been in an interesting place in nature or city that I could really, that really sort of fueled my next.
This is so great that I get to do this.
Oh.
I'm watching my friend's gallery show, and she's here and she's presenting her work.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so what happened during the pandemic is, as I was finishing up a landscape series on the Arctic, I was scrolling through, as we all do, and a friend of mine's Instagram caught my eye. She is a dentist and lives out in LA, and we were really friends from childhood and roommates in college, and we had gotten back in touch via social media a number of years ago. She had a side practice of making jewelry, and I bought some of her work, and she actually bought quite a bit of my work as well, but we hadn't seen each other. And anyway, I asked her, I saw this beautiful work that she was doing, these photographs of flowers that she was taking in a local botanical gardens called the Huntington Garden out near LA. And I found her, I knew, I could tell why she was doing this, to kind of relieve the stress of her job. So she was really going in, she's not a professional photographer, but she was going in and choosing really interesting plants and flowers. And I could tell she was focusing on form, on color, on shapes, on positive, negative, whether she knew it or not. But I saw those things, and I asked if I could paint them. And the first painting you showed was an African violet, and I think that was the first one that I did. I think she had suggested that to me. Why don't you try to paint that one? And I, I said, maybe this will come out, maybe this will be a thing. It'll be a series. And anyway, little by little, that's exactly what happened. And so I was attracted to especially the plants like this. As you can see, these are lotuses, lotus leaves and pods that have really interesting shapes, because like my landscape work, where I was focused on forms, shapes, big, little, how they interact with each other, this is what attracted me about the plants and the leaves. Now, this grouping, as you saw, the whole grouping was sort of like, I guess, a suite of, I don't know, Bach fugues or something, or, they were similar shapes, but interpreted in different ways. I also used a lot of drawing and texture in these particular paintings. And it just, I loved that ruffled round shape of the lotus leaf, the pods with their little tiny seeds, round seeds embedded inside. And I just did a series of them. Some of them are dying or drying up. Some of them are fresh, and then like this one, they're sort of in the autumn, and I think I call this one autumn lotus. And then the next one is actually lotuses sort of with the moon. And I've been in the past very much drawn to Japanese art, Japanese painting. And so I think these are very influenced by by that style, by that sort of minimalist. You can see some charcoal in this, and some pumice and some modeling paste to give texture. And it just, they're a sort of a group of lyrical studies that fit together to really feel what the lotus, explore what the lotus leaves and pods are like. You know, it was a deep dive into lotus. And so that's what these are about. So essentially, I took elements of some of her photographs and using imagination, reworked them, or I would take an area and focus on that, focus on the shadows, on the you know, the colors. So in this one, this is the same type of process where I was attracted by the big variegated looking lotus leaf, and the shadows form like a underneath on the water, or I should say reflections and shadows are a great contrast. And I'm really playing, you could tell they're lotus leaves, but there's an abstraction going on here. I'm playing with form, I'm playing with, you know, how things relate to each other in the painting. Shapes that are larger and smaller and squiggly and ruffled and so on. And so I had really great fun doing these paintings and just using those elements and sort of repurposing them, reusing them, and moving, you know, doing different things in different paintings with them. So. And these two, this is interesting. This is actually based on one of her photographs, but what I did when and most of these I would make sketches beforehand, and sometimes even do them in Posca marker. And what I did with this is I flipped the photo on my phone. So this is actually the same painting, but a mirror image. So they're mirror images of each other. And I just riffed on the colors. You know, the leaves are, I believe in the photo, are green. And I just, something about the yellow versus the blue, and the yellow versus the pink in the other one. You know, I really wanted, these are water lilies really. And again, beautiful shapes. These attracted me because of these, you know, the spiky shapes and the roughly round shapes of the leaves, how they contrast with one another and they kind of interact. So that's pink water lily and blue water lily. And the thing about these, it was, again, remember, it was the pandemic. So making these paintings was very, helped my well-being, let's put it this way, because being in nature is known to help with all sorts of things, and physiologically has been proven to improve some things that you need, like immune benefits and mental health and so on. But also painting from nature does that as well. And I not only, you know, was interesting painting this, but it was a sort of a way to maintain my sanity and well-being during the pandemic. So this one, this is I call it In the Jungle for obvious reasons, but it's based on a plant, which is probably pretty old, called a cycad. And specifically the name of this cycad is an encephalartos. And it's this very spiky, prehistoric looking palm tree. And I basically took the branches and just repeated them. And I used, there are some places where you see I used acrylic marker, and I really made, I mean, obviously this plant is not this color, but because it was just, I just wanted to use all of these very bright, vivid colors. So you could see a little bit of the outlining with the acrylic markers. I use something called a Posca pen or Posca marker. So, and there's a few, what are they called? Aloe plants there too. So the little fuzzy flowers are actually aloe flowers. So, and this is one of the biggest, if the biggest piece in the show. It's about 36 by 60. And there I had to put this guy in here, or this lady, I don't know, because as I was painting this, I realized that talking about art history, Carol, this reminded me very much of Henri Rousseau and his lions and so on, in the tigers or whatever, in his jungle-y like paintings. And so he had to go in there. I just saw him in there. And at first it started with eyes, and then I had to put the spots in. So anyway, so this was very fun to do. And so you have the light coming in at the top, and then the dark in the rest of the jungle underneath. So I really enjoyed doing this big piece. And the first piece, we went by it. If you could just flash to it really quickly, that's called Enlightenment, that one with the big yellow, that big yellow piece. And that's another example of using those elements in a much more abstract way. I just wanted to point that out. So. And then the last two, again, interesting, or three actually. The one in the middle I called La Serenissima, which is the name of Venice, the nickname of Venice. And there was a companion piece that sold a while ago that I called Carnevale, so which also in Venice. But this just was a very Serenissima, meaning serene, and just lotuses have that connotation. But once again, it's the, you know, the beautiful shapes that attracted me. So this is, and the water here I've painted in red, just more for, because it went so highlighted, the green and the yellow. So just being a bit creative with colors. So making it, again, a little more abstract. And the painting on the left really interested me, again, because of the repeating shapes. And these are foxglove, as the gardeners will know. And I love that bell-like shape that they have, and the open and the closed blossoms were great to paint. And so these are, this is one of the last paintings I did in this series, along with this one here too, which again, this attracted me because of this beautiful spiral. Calla lilies are gorgeous. Again, the geometry of the spiral and in this plant is, you know, really interesting, and it's very sculptural. So I played around with the spiral and really offsetting it from the background with a dark background, so it's almost like a sculpture. And the whole, I put that background in like as if it's either dusk or maybe early dawn, and just by chance, really. And then the whole thing sort of started reminding me a little bit of an O'Keeffe. And I've called, and a friend said, oh, you should call it Georgia's Dream after Georgia O'Keeffe, the painter. But I decided to call it The Calla Lilies Are in Bloom Again, which if you're like of a certain age, you might know the movie with Katharine Hepburn, which it's not Philadelphia Story, I don't think. It's another one. But anyway, it's a famous line. It's like a silly toss-off line from this movie. And so anyway, that's what it is. The Calla Lilies Are in Bloom Again. And that's it.
It's a beautiful show, Pia.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next we'll visit Fran Lightman Gibson. Hello, Fran. You're muted, Fran.
I just said hello, but I waved also, so now you know.
Yes.
I was saying hello. So this is an interesting one to start with. I could say a little bit about myself here.
Yes, tell us.
I went to the Philadelphia College of Art, now known as the University of the Arts. And I went to Tyler School. So I had a classical education, but I was a Philadelphian first and foremost. I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to Philadelphia schools. And these paintings are coming back to Philadelphia. I used to paint abstract painting, and I spent a lot of time in other countries and cities. I spent a lot of time in New Mexico, where my daughter lives. She might actually be walking through here. She hasn't been home in 3 years, so in a minute she might be showing up. This is a street I've walked down thousands of times. I grew up in Philadelphia. I say I'm the quintessential Philadelphian in that I lived 10 miles from where I was born. I went to school here, every school. I felt every street when I was in art school. Every year I moved to a different street. I lived on this street. I lived on many streets. My friends all lived on different streets. And so this street in particular and some of these other streets that you're going to see are places that I have a very strong feeling. In 2015, a friend of mine who's a poet, a Philadelphia poet, asked me to paint a painting of Philadelphia for the cover of his book, which I actually have right here. I don't know if you can see it, but this painting, which is about 5 feet, was for his book, Ernie Yates. And I love poetry. Cathleen Cohen will tell you that I actually attend her workshops and I write poetry because Kathy sort of brought me back to the poet in myself. But I grew up in a family of musicians, and a lot of these paintings that you're going to see, these are drawings. These two drawings I started after COVID. And the one next to it, these are drawings that I just was reliving, not the moments of Philadelphia, but more the musicality, the music that I hear in my head all the time. As I wrote a long time ago, it's on my website, that I hear music when I walk down these streets. I hear the Roots, I hear Patti LaBelle, I hear all the things that I grew up listening to. And I also came from a family of musicians. My cousin played with Count Basie, and my parents sang with Frank Sinatra. And so my brother sang on the stage of the Academy of Music and was one of those folk heroes. Sadly, though, I lost most of my family through the years. My parents died very young. My brother, who I just mentioned, that cousin that I just mentioned. So I kind of dwell on certain things that, certain poems that I love. One of them is T.S. Eliot. And T.S. Eliot writes about the stillness, the point of stillness. And that's where the dance is. And so these paintings are sort of at the still point, that's where the dance is, and it's only where the dance is. And these are my speed, my motion, my action, but also my memory, my reflections. And I also have a reference to my love of Cezanne and other painters, where even it's almost 70, exactly the age he wrote this, he said, I find that the sensations of color that light creates abstractions, and they don't let me cover my canvas or follow the outlines of objects when the points of contact are tenuous and delicate, thus my image or picture is incomplete. And that's who I am. Yeah, I'm almost 70. In June, I'll be 70. My friends, some of whom are on this call right now, one of whom from PCA, we're very musical, and we still play music all the time. I'm also from this school of Larry Day and Edie Neff, who were my teachers and friends, and Sidney Goodman. I'm actually in a painting of Sidney Goodman's that was at the Whitney. So I just have to say that these are my statement paintings that after COVID, that before COVID, I was going back to Philadelphia and saying, are you still there, Philadelphia? And now I'm saying, I know you're there and I'm there too. And that's sort of how I feel about some of the work that's here, like these three. I'm here too. This one is sort of, it's just pushing out, and this is me pushing out. It could look like De Chirico's ghost, like you were saying, Pia. There's just some things that are reflective of other things that I've seen and I want to see in my own work, and I let the work speak to me. I just say, what did you want to say about that? And I wait to hear the answer. And I pull it out and it just tells me where to go, and my fascination for botanicals, trees, and I've spent a lot of time in the botanical gardens in St. Andrews, Scotland, where my daughter went to school. I was just so heartbroken that I missed her so much that all I did was paint flowers for years. Most of the paintings I did were things of, longing and missing and so on. St. Andrews, and then she went to New Mexico, and my paintings were called The Road Just Taken, because everything was flying by me so fast in life, and except there was that still point. And so this painting, for example, the front could be a car, it could be shadow, it could be any kind of emotion, but I love this intersection. I do a lot of paintings of this intersection. You sort of say to yourself, I know where I am here. I know where I can go from here. I've been here, so it's a personal thing, but it's also hopefully an opportunity for other people to just want to go to, whether it's Philadelphia or not. And then I sort of, have other moments where I'm underneath the highway. I'm sort of on roads that most people don't go on, but I enjoy these places where there is also the stillness and the dance, which is a personal thing. This could be under the highway. I could be traveling at the speed of life under the highway, and then of course I could take the highway, and it could be many different things. It could be within and without.
So Fran, can I ask?
One of the things I wrote, which is my kind of mantra, which is, if you need a place to go, take any road. And that's how I survived the loss of all those family members, 2 brothers, cousin, parents. It just was a disaster. So I take any road. These are my roads. These are my speedy get out of Dodge road. I'm in Philadelphia, but I could be anywhere else, and I could be there tomorrow road. But it's also the formal aspect of the paint. And I enjoy learning from the paint itself and telling me, well, sorry, but we're going to be using a different palette today. And I say, okay, let's go for it. You know, you'll find that my early painting is a totally different palette than this. But I enjoy learning from my own things. You know, what did this tell me today? And I'm always listening to music. I'm always thinking about transitions, like in music. You know, like I said, a lot of people in my family are musicians, and the transitions are the key. Where does this come from? Where does this go? How does this speed up? Is this a symphony? Is this a rhapsody? You know, so on and so forth. And then the final painting is the outside my window during COVID obsession with the outside of my window. It's like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I painted and drew this window, this tree, those trees with and without leaves in an obsessive way. And this one is the culmination where I just said, tell me where you want to be. And I know you. I know your shadows, and I know your distance, and I know your quiet, your loneliness, your color. And thank you very much for the opportunity to spend weeks and weeks looking at you. And then now I'm going to be done with you. So I love this painting. I know it doesn't seem to be related to the other paintings, but I have the proclivity to go on with that kind of thing too. And maybe next time I will. So we'll see. I hope that helps people see these paintings and through my eyes.
Thanks very much, Fran. So we're going to move down to Denise Cedar right now. So hello, Denise.
Hi everyone. Welcome to my show. I am an abstract artist, and I did not have a formal education, but I did take fine art courses in college later in life. And I have been taking classes at local art associations. Something happened to my Zoom.
Yeah. Hang on a minute.
Okay.
Somebody's sharing their screen.
Oh,
there we go.
There we go. Anyway, I have taken courses for years since my children were finally off to school. I started taking art courses and painting, and just never stopped. And I'm still learning. I'm still taking courses. And for this show, you'll see that I put together a body of work consisting of those portraits and a few figures. During COVID, I had the opportunity to take some of these online courses in portraiture. And this show is a culmination of my work. So I'll give you an overview of my process as Tina walks through the show. I never start my paintings in the same way. I might draw my subjects on the canvas one day. Another day, I'll just throw some random paint and bright colors or dark colors and use that as my base. Or I'll use collage and thick medium and work on top of that. But my paintings are definitely driven by the emotion of the day, which I feel keeps my work interesting. I use a variety of mediums, from oils, oil sticks, acrylics, pastels, collage, pencil, charcoals, inks, and crayons. I also use many different tools, paintbrushes, palette knives, squeegees, old credit cards, anything that you could push the paint around and make marks. You'll see a lot of layers, textures, and mark making. There's a range of whimsy to serious emotion in the faces, especially the eyes, which is actually an extension of my feelings that spills out onto the work, sometimes without my even knowing it. My inspiration for the work in this show was through photographs, but seeing beyond the face and into the soul of the subject. It was a very tumultuous period of time. There was a lot of mixed emotions. So there was a lot of sorrow, but also humor. There was a lot of anxiety, but also some peaceful soul searching. So that came out in my work. I think I love painting different genres, and portraits are a real challenge for me to try to capture the essence of a person onto the canvas. So I think during COVID was a good time for me to take on that challenge. It took a lot of effort, so that took my mind off of a lot of what was going on around me. So as you can see in this one, the eyes are very dark. So I must have been feeling very anxious when I was doing this portrait. And there's a lot of layers and different things that you can see. I do want to talk about one particular painting, but Tina hasn't quite gotten to it yet. So I think it's coming up soon. But this group here, I think this speaks to what was going on. There was with the Black Lives Movement, and this painting in particular, underneath there's a lot of writing, and it was a song from the 60s, a group called It's a Beautiful Day. And it was about a bird that was caged and how she must fly to be free. And I felt like the hands were trying to say, you know, like, don't touch my hair. And it was a time when I was trying to listen to like what the Black people were saying about their feelings and their emotions. So the other two, one's entitled Hear Me, and the other is entitled See Me. So that really fit into during that time. Oh, and this one, it's called, okay, wait, yeah, Refusing to See. And I blocked out her eyes because a lot of times I didn't want to see what was happening. There was so much on the news that, you know, you just didn't want to deal with. And a lot of people were just shutting down. So that's an oil painting. And I felt like the eyes really told a story. And the next painting, this is the one I want to talk about before I wrap up. It's my favorite painting, and it's entitled, I've Got All My Sisters With Me. The girls depicted in this painting are not anyone in particular. It's from photos that I found on the internet through my courses, which I abstracted and interpreted in my own way. The painting has a lot of emotion in it, as I am one of 3 sisters. So I tried to capture the different personalities and looks of each one of the girls using my own family experiences. The painting has a lot of layering of paint, mediums, there's writing and collage. That can all be clearly seen in person. So I'm hoping you get to see through the camera what's the layers and what's underneath.
Sorry.
And then these are the figures. These are kind of whimsical. So this was probably a time where I felt some humor, because there were good times during COVID where you were able to really look within yourself. And I do like a lot of humor, but these are a little bit of whimsy. And they're the figure part of my work. And once again, there's all kinds of layers under there, and writing and thick mediums that I've painted over. And my colors are much brighter. And this one is called Self-Acceptance, I think.
Yes, self-acceptance.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see there's the whimsy and not serious. And the distorted figures that make it kind of fun.
So Denise, the figures, are you working from photos from them too, or do you work from the model as well?
No, they were from photos, but then, you know, I would look at the photo and really distort it and abstract it out. Mm-hmm. So they don't look anything like the photographs.
This is an interesting one.
Yeah, that one was, yeah, and you can see the face doesn't really, like, you could see it's very abstracted, and her body is not like a real body. So, and I let things drip and run, and
it's a great show. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, and Tina. And I hope everyone enjoyed it and felt the emotion behind the work. Thank you.
So does anyone have any questions for Denise or any of the other artists? All right then. Well, we will end here. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you to all the artists for their fine work and for their discussion tonight. So the show is up through May 1st. Hopefully you can come down and see it. And then,
thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tina. Very, very special.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Mike and Tina.
Everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.